Hello and welcome back to PredictIt Live, only on Old Bull TV, your exclusive source for real-time coverage of the stock market for politics. And viewers, we trust that you're joining us with somewhat fatter wallets than yesterday, because for the second day in a row, our picks managed to pave the way to PredictIt riches. First via the Pennsylvania ballot amendment, and then yesterday with the House vote on the January 6th commission. We're going to try and three-peat that for you today. Gaeten and Pratik are both here to help us do it. They've got some fresh picks. We've got your first look at today's new predicted markets, and we are taking your questions live. So let's get right to it. Political traders, I am your host, Flip Pidot. And if you're joining us for the first time or you haven't yet pulled the trigger on opening your PredictIt account, remember we can get you off and running with up to $25 in real free cash to trade with. Just head to predictit.org/promo/oldbull25 and collect that free $25. And if you're here with us live and you have a question for the panel, go ahead and ask that in the chat window. If you're not watching live, first of all, shame on you. You're missing out on all the real-time market moves that our guests' insights typically trigger. But if for whatever reason you had to catch this on the replay, then we're still happy to take your questions on Twitter, where we are at Old Bull TV. Please also take a quick second to subscribe to the channel while you're here, and then click on that bell icon to turn on notifications so that you can rest assured you'll never miss a live show again. And as you do that, let's say hello to today's panel. Joining us once again from Star Spangled Gamblers, it's Pratik Chougule. Welcome back, Pratik.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. And fresh back from vacation, swimming in yet another windfall of PredictIt cash, it's Gaeten Dugas. Gaeten, as of today, I see you're back in the top 20 on the leaderboard, so congrats and welcome back.
Thanks. Yeah, I just got back from Cancun. You probably noticed as I went from ghost white to vanilla yogurt white, so I'm looking pretty good.
Well, we hope you're tanned, rested, and ready for some more PredictIt action. Let's get right into it, because this has been an eventful day already. It's been eventful several days, and today is no exception. We've just had the vote in the House on the capital security bill. And as you can see here, the bottom bracket, or B-min as we call it, jumped from 8 cents to 99 cents. So the headline here is that the bill did pass, but with a scant one-vote margin. The roll call was 213 yes to 212 no. And in fact, there was some drama at the wire there with some Republicans trying to change their votes at the very last minute to turn this from a pass to a fail. So it was an exciting outcome. I was not playing this one. I was kind of keeping half an eye on it, but not really actively involved. But Gaeten, I gathered that you were tied up in all this mess. So tell us about how it unfolded this morning.
Yeah, this was kind of a wild market from the start, because unlike yesterday's market, nobody was really reporting on any whip counts. So everybody was kind of going in blind on this one. And in fact, so I made several plays on this one. The first was when yesterday's resolved B-max, the B-max price on this one went up a lot, which didn't make, well, that was a poor judgment, just because this bill is very different from the January 6th commission bill. So at that time, I maxed B-no on B-max at that time. And then by this morning, that bracket was almost dead. I also maxed based on the very little punch bowl reporting that was out there. They said that they were expecting little partisan support, which I interpreted as some. So I actually maxed B1 no as well. And as you saw, B1 was the winning bracket. So I ended up getting out of that at a $250 loss. And the reason I did that was when they were doing the motion to recommit, right before they take the final vote, they left it open a really long time. And then reporting started rolling out that the House leadership was whipping people on the floor. Basically, they were worried that they weren't going to be able to pass the bill. So at that time, I sold out, and I actually flipped my B1 position into a yes position, which ended up paying off for me. But it was kind of a wild one where nobody knew what was going on, and then the vote just stayed open and open. That was a pretty good signal that Pelosi and crew were having some trouble gathering the votes.
Yeah, and it was interesting too, because just the way that the House math works out currently with such a bare majority that the Democrats have, it only takes a handful of defectors to put a very partisan vote like this to a virtual tie. And in this case, you had the squad mates basically were the Democrats who did not get on board with this. I don't think they voted, or at least didn't all vote directly against, but voted present. And I gather this is kind of a defund the police, or theorizing about Capitol cops potentially being complicit in the January 6th events is sort of the impetus behind the sort of farther left progressive squad mates deciding that they weren't going to support this. But was your strategy here taking any of that into account? Because I don't think it was a huge secret that maybe those members wouldn't have been as big fans of this. And with that bottom bracket being at just 218, it doesn't take more than, as I said, a few to defect for a B-min resolution that still includes the bill passage, which of course is somewhat irregular anyway. Again, the B-min is usually a proxy for the thing failing, but here with some partisan defections from the majority, you were able to get passage, but through the B-min bracket. So was that squad driven, cram down of the winning vote total, part of your thought process here?
No, it wasn't. I totally missed that. In fact, I thought that they were going to pick up at least a couple Republican support.
Right.
So it was all just playing it by ear during the motion to recommit vote and seeing what was happening, and then reacting to the chaos, basically.
Well, nice job. It sounds like you escaped, not only escaped a potential loss, but managed to eke out a pretty decent gain in the end. So it's a testament to being nimble and adjusting your strategy as these events unfold, and being able to kind of realize what's unfolding in real time, at least faster than the market can.
Yep, definitely.
All right. Well, let's on that note, talk a little bit about this other big vote that we had last night. I think it was around 6 or 6:15 by the time the vote actually came in. And this is, of course, on the House vote on the establishment of the commission to investigate the January 6th Capitol attack. And Pratik and I went over this again yesterday. So we spent a couple of days actually on this show looking at this market. And we, 2 days in a row, were recommending buying the B max bracket. And actually on this slide, since the market's settled now, I don't think you can see it unless, Zach, if we're able to scroll down. I'm going to show you if you can see the winning bracket. There it is, 245 or more winning. So we were doing a furious amount of whip counting yesterday and actually talking to members, including one on the Problem Solver Caucus. That was sort of the big block of Republicans that were going to support this, trying to figure out the math. We were trying to figure out if Representative Goldman from Maine, just celebrated the birth of his daughter, was back on Capitol Hill, because he literally could have been the 245th vote for this. But long story short, the Republicans needed, or the bill needed, at least 27 Republicans to vote for it to hit that top bracket of 245. And as you know, both House and Senate Republican leadership came out against the bill, but they weren't really whipping it too hard. John Katko, the Republican ranking member of the Homeland Security bill that negotiated the deal, was aggressively whipping it from his office throughout the entire Republican delegation. And going into the vote, they signaled that they thought they had about 20 to 30 votes, or that they felt they had 20 to 30 solid votes. So again, you need to be the upper end of that, 27 or more, to hit this B-max. B-max had slid back down to, I think, about 40 or low 40s by the time Pratik and I were making our final call on it yesterday at this hour. And we said that we felt at that price, while it was less certain than it was before McConnell came out against it, which spooked some members, we still felt there was good value there. So we were still recommending that you stay in or get into BMAX at that price in the low 40s. And of course, it did not only turn out to work out a few hours later with a nice doubling plus of an investment in that bracket, but it actually exceeded even Katko's own expectations. They wound up with 35 defections. So there were some of those kind of rank and file uncounted defections that we speculated on this show there could be, that if they say they think they've got 20 to 30, but that's based on the yeses they've counted, who knows if within the couple hundred others, this is a man, Representative Katko, who is not a professional whip counter. I mean, that's not usually his job. So if he's got his staffers kind of burning up the phone lines, they may not be counting all the successes that are actually happening behind the scenes. So of course that did happen to work out. did hopefully line the pockets of a few of you viewers who acted on that recommendation. But Pratik, again, you were here with me yesterday chatting about this. What's your reaction? We haven't gotten to talk in real time since the vote actually happened. Were you surprised with the eventual haul of 35 yes votes from the Republicans?
No, I wasn't surprised. I mean, I think that, as we discussed on our pod before, I think that there is a real residue of Republicans who are not happy with the direction of the party, or at least for them, something like the Capitol attack is a line that's too far. But it makes perfect sense that if they're ultimately going to be part of this group of, as we saw, 35, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them in this climate to really be out there the way Liz Cheney and a few others are, and really make hay out of it. That as we had talked about, it seems like a better approach just to silently cast the vote. I mean, I think also going forward, what this shows is that it kind of confirms the intuition of the Republican leadership that having these kinds of votes and this January 6th issue being in play is not a good thing for the party. It's something that very much can divide the party and obviously create just any number of endless news cycles in which the country writ large is reminded of the fact that there is actually a partisan split on an issue that one would maybe at an earlier period would have led to bipartisan condemnation.
Well, let's go from that House vote now to another market that's been up on the board only for about a day. This is one of the new markets that we looked at yesterday, and this is, of course, the companion market for the Senate vote, which is not going to be as immediate. Again, these last 2 days we've had one-day markets, 24-hour resolving markets. There's been a lot of fast action trading here on PredictIt this week. This new market is again, a counterpart. It's just the same mechanics. It's how many yes votes will there be in the Senate on establishment of January 6th Commission, in this case by June 25th. So as we pointed out, there's a little bit of a wrinkle in this one, which is that this doesn't necessarily have to be the vote tally on HR 3233, the thing that the House passed yesterday. This could involve a reworked version of the bill with various amendments, or it could even be going back to the drawing board. It could even go back to a different committee in the House. It could come out of the House Intelligence Committee, pass the House, and come back to the Senate in a very different form within the next 5 weeks. And this would still resolve as yes, or within whichever numerical bracket is relevant, if such a bill were to pass. What's interesting here, and you can see the bottom bracket here, B min 59 or fewer, has gone up from the mid 60s to the high 80s just today, just over the last few hours. And this is because increasingly some of the presumed Senate Republican maybes have been becoming more Senate Republican no's. In fact, if we can bring up this kind of informal whip count that we've been trying to maintain here, this is basically a tally of the statements by the various potentially swayable Republican members of the Senate, and where that would leave the overall math in this market. We presume that 50 out of 50 Democrats will vote for it. Again, as we mentioned yesterday, Vice President Harris's potential vote as the tiebreaker would not count for purposes of scoring this market. So then you've got these, what do we have, about 13 senators here that are potentially swayable or have made their opinions known. This has shifted a lot over the last 24 hours. First, as McConnell came out against the commission, but then some of the folks who had been sort of soft yeses and moved into the maybe column said, well, we want to see what happens in the House, see how how bipartisan the House result is. Again, the House result turned out to be more bipartisan than most expected. So we thought, well, maybe then there's the disposition of these maybes go slightly back towards the yeses. That does not seem to have happened in the intervening hours. It may be a testament to McConnell's stronger grip on his delegation than McCarthy has on the House side. But in fact, most recently, we saw Senator Richard Burr make a statement that sounded like he's a fairly firm no, and we had him in the undecided column previously. So the path now to 60 or more votes, which is likely what they would need to actually pass it, assuming that they mount a filibuster in opposition to it, becomes basically implausible. It was already somewhat implausible, but here you really can't see it, because as we talked about yesterday, with the exception of McConnell and Johnson, you need all of these other senators to back it to get to 60. And that was already looking like a pretty narrow path. But with several now saying they're inclined against it, at least in its current form, it does seem to make that path to 60 basically implausible. Not impossible, but in the current form, it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. And so as a result, you see this pricing. If we can go back to the market page where, again, the B-min, 59 or fewer, which also is a proxy for the thing just never coming to a vote or passing with fewer than 59 votes or being successfully filibustered, et cetera, is in fact trading at, here you see 87 cents. And the minimum asked if you wanted to buy a position would be 88 cents. However, as I alluded to up top, there is the other pathway for this of it being reworked, amended, sent back to the House, coming out of a different committee at any point in the next 5 weeks. If they can reach a different kind of a compromise that McConnell can get behind, maybe even that McCarthy can get behind, or at least a few more of these senators can get behind, then it's possible. The thing is, if that does happen, and I don't think and wouldn't argue that it's particularly likely, but if it were to happen, it still would be the kind of thing that you're probably going to get just a squeaker of a result here. So it's going to be 60, maybe 61. Hard to see it being more than 61, even if it becomes much more palatable and kind of McConnell approved. So I gather from where we were chatting just before the show that Gaeten, you're of sort of a similar mind here, and you've actually begun to put a strategy in place. Maybe you'd characterize it as a speculative one, but I think it's an interesting one given the current pricing. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing in this market.
Yeah, so right off the bat, I maxed out B4 no and everything above B4 no. Now these are not cheap shares. I got 98 cents for most brackets, one bracket at 97, one bracket at 96. So I'm not making a ton of money on those brackets, but I just see them as incredibly unlikely based on everything that we've seen so far. I'm not in B1 at all. I don't like either side of that right now. Instead, what I've done is I bought some lotto shares on B2, which is 60 to 61, or B3, which is 62 to 63. So I paid $20 for 500 shares at 4 cents of B2, and then $10 at 2 cents, so 500 shares of B3. And I did that just for basically the reasons that you outlined. Maybe Schumer takes another shot at this. Who knows? But when they're that cheap, I mean, I'm spending $30 to buy these lotto tickets, and who knows, maybe one will pay off.
Yeah, I think that's right. You've got a month here, and who knows what will shake loose. And if you can get in for 4 or 5 cents on that bottom bracket, or as you got in 2 cents on the third bracket, this has to be money that you're happy to completely lose and sort of just build the position and let it ride and see what happens with it. So
I'll still from the lower bracket, from those higher brackets.
Yeah. Right.
From those higher bracket nodes. I'm gonna make money on this market anyway, unless something incredibly wild happens. So taking a little bit of those winnings and throwing it in some lotto tickets, no issues with that.
Absolutely. And when they're this cheap too, it doesn't even have to resolve as B2 or B3, right? If you're in at 4 cents or 2 cents and there's simply a news cycle that, yes, McConnell and Schumer have agreed that they want to put together some conferences to see if they can work out some differences, or if Rounds or Ruby or whomever else comes out and says, hey, I'm still a no on this in the current form, but were they able to come to a new deal that involved A, B, and C? In other words, if they start putting out the feelers saying, I don't like this, I'm not going to vote for this, but here's the compromise I could live with. It could be a news story like that or two that take this from 4 cents to 8 cents, at least for long enough for you to get out and have doubled your money. So this is kind of a nice dynamic to have around a speculative lotto play like this, where it could actually resolve yes, and you make a 20 to 40x return, or you could simply have a favorable news cycle where you can get out with a very nice, 50, 100% or more upside. Pratik, are you playing on this one, or are you eyeing it for potential kind of opportunistic entry points?
Look, I mean, I agree with Gaeten. There's nothing about 88 cents on 59 or fewer that's worth playing either side. I will just say a note of caution on the lotto strategy here. I mean, normally I'm all for these lotto plays, and maybe in B2 I might take it at around 2 or 3 cents. But I think the point of caution here is in the scenario you're outlining is that given the vote we saw in the House, where you did end up seeing a sizable Republican defection, I'm not sure I see the advantage. If I'm thinking about the incentives facing Schumer and the Democratic leadership, At this point in the process, what incentive do they have of reworking the bill and in order to try to get some kind of significant Republican support behind it? I think they have, if you're just looking at it strictly as a through a political lens, I actually think at this point, the Democratic leadership has an incentive to try to go for a bill that really kind of sticks it to Republicans, creates a partisan issue out of this. I don't see what is in it for the Democratic leadership at this point to give soft Republicans a way out here. So, and if they are going to not fundamentally...
Oop. Pratik, I think we lost you there for a second.
The vote get a 60-61, so I might pay 2-3 cents for it.
Okay, and with apologies, we lost your audio there for just a second, Pratik. But I think you're back with us. Yeah, and in terms of, you're talking about the kind of political lens here too, and I think that's worth, obviously, always worth considering in terms of trying to predict how these things are going to play out. And I wonder too, if to the extent that Schumer and other Democrats are looking at this, at least in part through the craven lens of electoral politics, which of course they are. Part of the question becomes, how big a bludgeon is this for them as they head into the midterms, when they're expected to lose a few more seats in the House? And again, it only takes a few to lose the House and possibly Senate as well. So as they're looking at this in terms of the majorities coming out of the 22 midterm cycle, is a commission, sort of capital C commission, a bigger bludgeon, something they can, issue a nice big meaty report to Congress and paint Republicans, the presumption would be, in a more negative light, or, as Pelosi has mentioned as an alternative, forming a select committee. I mean, is that just as good in terms of the primary investigative purpose and reform outcomes that they would presumably hope for, but also from the electoral political angle? Does a select committee give them as much juice going into 2022, or is a commission and its subpoena powers and whatever else, although I suppose select committee has subpoena powers too? So, I mean, is there really anything that's much more advantageous politically to them to have this as a commission? That's just sort of the, I guess, devil's argument counterpoint to your question of what incentive would Schumer have, or would the Democrats have, to making a more palatable bipartisan bill that could get to 60 votes. Maybe that's it. If there is more firepower, more teeth, electoral teeth in the commission. What's your sense of that? Would they rather have a commission than a select committee, all things equal, or is this simply it's a vote of political theater, and at the end of the day, there's going to be an investigative body with subpoena powers, so it doesn't really matter?
I mean, I think there are basically only two things that might be materially different to change the Democratic incentives. I think one is if they can get Trump himself in front of Congress somehow or the other. And then I think obviously the other person really vulnerable here is Kevin McCarthy. The prospect of him testifying under oath, I think, could be quite damning. I don't know. We'll see. I can't imagine a scenario in which they haul a former president in front of Congress for this kind of thing. So I don't know. I mean, 2-3 cents in B2 maybe, but I'm not seeing the political incentives fundamentally changing here.
Fair enough. Well, I will, just to close the loop, I'm going to agree with you that I like B2 a lot better than B3. Again, Gaeten got into B3 at half price when he got into B2, but I would focus only on B2. And I think it's worth more than 2 or 3. Right now, you can't get in for less than 5. That's where I start to get a little more nervous. If I could get in at 4, like Gaeten did, then I think there might be some appetite here. But again, this is much higher risk speculative money, and you need to keep an eye on it too to potentially liquidate if this pops a few pennies, and maybe your best exit point. With that, though, let's pivot to the new markets. There are a couple of really interesting ones that have just hit the site today. And the first one we're going to look at is in Florida. This is the Democratic primary for the Senate race. This is Rubio's seat, which is up in 2022. And Pratik, you're going to tell us a little bit about how we might start thinking about these odds. As you can see, currently we've got 3 names on the board, only one with pricing, as again, it's a brand new market, not terribly liquid yet, but you got Val Demings at 70. Tell us about how you're thinking about this new market, Pratik.
Well, I want to preface my comments by saying that my Florida track record is not exactly impeccable. I mean, unquestionably, the worst bets I made, both in 2020 and 2018, were in Florida, where I thought the Democrats would end up doing better than they ended up doing. But with that said, I mean, I think across the board, if you're looking at Florida 2022 markets, I think that the pricing is a bit favorable to Republicans. I think, obviously, I would say both DeSantis in the governor's race and Rubio in the Senate are favorites, but I don't think they're 80% favorites. Now, if you want to focus on the Senate race, I mean, I think there are potentially two opportunities here. The first is on the price for Val Demings. I saw, the last I checked in Politico, Politico is quoting sources basically saying she's more than 98% decided on running. So we'll have to see exactly how the market ends up kind of settling on a price here. But I mean, if it looks like it'll settle, I guess right now somewhere between 47 and 70, I'm probably inclined to buy there, basically just on the idea that when Demings formalizes the decision, you might get a market bump there. I mean, I also think now, moving into the general market, which party will win the U.S. Senate in Florida, the markets have been giving Rubio roughly 81% chance. I think it actually even got a little bit higher in the last few days. I'm happy to take the Democrats there, and I think that basically there are two calculations here. The first is that I think if Val Demings, in fact, gets in, I think she is generally an underrated talent. I think she's going to run a very serious statewide platform. She, by all accounts, seems to be a very hardworking, disciplined candidate who can raise the money. And then a lot of it goes to what we've been talking about too with this January 6th commission. I mean, my every expectation is that for the next year, time and again, Rubio is going to have to be in this delicate balance where he has to appease a Republican base that is increasingly uncompromising, even on things like the January 6th commission, while also figuring out a way to broaden his appeal among independents. Even if you say that Florida is now a kind of Republican-leaning state, it's hard to win statewide without having broad-based appeal among independents and so forth. And I'm happy to pay 18, 19, 20 cents basically as a bet that you'll see at least one tight poll between now and 2022 that drives that price closer to 50-50.
Gaeten, do you have any opinion on this market? Are you eyeing it for potential entry?
Nope, sitting this one out for now. Haven't researched this one yet.
All right, traders. Well, if you are moved by Pratik's analysis here, this might be a good time to get in. Again, when the markets are illiquid like this and before they kind of find their footing and their directionality, can be a time to scalp some unfairly good prices. So keep an eye on this one if it's one that you are interested in. The other one that is brand new to the site today that we want to take a look at is one that a lot of people have been asking for and always are popular markets on the site, and that's to do with Supreme Court nominations. Specifically, this is whether the Senate will confirm a Supreme Court justice in 2021. And Gaeten's going to talk to us a little bit about this one, but I want to just note that there are, of course, a couple ways this could go. You could have a vacancy on the court due to a death or a retirement, or, of course, as has been in the news, rumblings about court expansion, court packing, depending on your ideological perspective. If there suddenly are more seats available, you could have potentially multiple nominations this year, which could, of course, lead to confirmations this year. However, I would note, and interestingly, coincidentally or otherwise, with the launch of this market, Biden's 36-member commission to study court packing just had their first formal meeting. I think it was yesterday or even today. But in any event, the timeline on their issuing a report, which presumably would offer the cover or justification for an expansion, I believe is not due out until towards the end of November. I think it's 180 days from either when it was impaneled or they start that first meeting. But so very close to the end of the year. And so since this market is tied to actual confirmation, again, the norms that existed in Supreme Court nominations and confirmations from a few years ago maybe are quite shifted now, but still this would seem like an awfully tight time frame for this one to resolve, yes, due to expansion of the court. So it's a long way of getting around to saying this is basically probably a little more of a vanilla Supreme Court confirmation market than than it might have been, depending on if it had been structured a little differently or had a little bit of the longer term expiration date. But with that as kind of the context here, Gaeten, how are you thinking about this, and what do you think of this pricing? Again, so this is a new one, and so as we said, they're often illiquid, but these binaries do tend to see the order book fill out a little bit more quickly just because they're a little bit simpler to handicap, and there's only one contract to be played. And as you can see now, this is trading at 38 cents. So what do you think? Fair price, cheap, expensive, and which side are you thinking about playing?
So I actually own about half of the active shares in this market right now. And when I first saw this market, I got my gut reaction. My gut reaction is, okay, Ginsburg died at a very inopportune time, basically gave the Republicans a Supreme Court seat. There's no way that Dems are going to let that happen again. That was before researching anything, right? So my initial gut was like, yeah, Breyer's going to retire. They're going to replace him. That's not what reality reflects. Breyer is trying to come off as this non-political figure. He wants to keep the courts out of the political realm. So he doesn't want to retire just because a Democrat is president. So I figured a lot of people would probably go through that same cycle. So what I ended up doing was, when I saw this market, I put an order out for 1,000 shares of no at 54 cents. And I did get those filled. And I think there's only 2,200 active shares. So it's about half of them that are out there. Since then, the price is quite a bit closer. Like if this got to 66, 67, I'd probably sell my shares that I have. Where it's at right now, 64, I think that's probably pretty good pricing. Like I wouldn't buy in either way at this price. If it goes down a little bit to maybe 60 or a little below 60, I'd jump in on the no side.
So sorry, you're currently in the yes or the no side?
I'm in the no side at 54 cents.
You're in the no side. That's what I thought. Okay, anymore. So gotcha. But you were saying a couple pennies richer, and you'd think about thinning out that position?
Yeah, I had some sells out earlier at 66 and 67, but then the sell book filled up ahead of me, so I just pulled them. Yeah.
Well, Pratik, curious to hear your thoughts here too. I would need to research this more to come to a really firm conclusion. But with Breyer's book, which is slated for release in September, and the thinking is that suggests he expects to still be a justice in September. Barring anything truly unforeseen or untimely happening to one or more of the justices, this does seem to be a fairly remote possibility. Of course, the problem here is if something unexpected does happen, the price moves against you faster than you can liquidate your position. So that's always an additional risk. But sort of looking elsewhere for what other crowds are thinking about this prospect, I was looking also on the site Metaculus. They've got a couple of questions open on this. One on whether a vacancy arises this year, which of course is not the same question as whether a new nominee is confirmed this year, as PredictIt is asking. But they have just 32 cents on a vacancy arising in 2021. If that's correct, then the odds of confirmation in 2021, of course, are somewhat south of that. How far south would depend on when the vacancy arose and how long it took to get a confirmation done. But that would suggest fair value maybe somewhere more like in the 20s, if not lower. They also have a median forecast on when the next SCOTUS vacancy arises at March 13th, 2022. Not that there's any magic about that date, but again, that's sort of a median of a range of these crowd forecasts. The other thing to keep in mind here too would be that Senate math that we looked at on the January 6th commission market. And of course, with just 50 votes, they can't ram through as mightily as they might be able to with a larger majority, especially with a couple of more moderate Democrats that have sometimes stymied Senator Schumer's plans. So again, I would need to do some more homework on this before thinking about staking a position or making a confident pick on either side. But those are sort of some of the things that I'd be thinking about. Would be, what is the Senate math like here? What's happening with Breyer and his literary exploits, and anyone else's health, of course, would be something to keep an eye on. But Pratik, what do you make of Gaeten's analysis, his trade strategy here, and is this one that you're looking to get to take a position on either side of this market?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely interested in no's at the current price. I'm happy to pay for no in the mid 60s, and I think that as long as this theory is out there about Breyer resigning, my hunch is that that's left-wing or liberal wishful thinking more than anything else. I think people who bet on PredictIt tend to think about these things in a very political lens, but when you just look at how Supreme Court vacancies have historically opened up, I mean, there's every incentive for the vast majority of these justices to stay in the position basically until they die or can't really do the job. Occasionally you see people retiring when they're bored of the job, but to retire with a kind of political lens in mind, I mean, occasionally we see it. I suppose we saw it with Kennedy and so forth. But from what I know about Breyer, I don't really see it at the end of the year. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that this is largely a death market. And the other factor here too that I think, Flip, you talked about it, but timing here very much works to the favor, I think, of the no position, because even if you figure that there's a retirement sometime in the fall, it just takes a long time for a president to vet Supreme Court nominees, figure out the politics of that, put them in front of the Senate, and then go through the entire Senate confirmation process. And to be able to ram a nominee through, I mean, yes, McConnell did it under extraordinary circumstances, but that's hardly the norm. So my hunch here is that traders are probably overestimating the possibility of a Breyer resignation. And even if that scenario comes to pass, I think all you really need to have your no position in a good shape is to have all this extend into the late fall, and then the calendar starts to work in your favor.
Yeah, then theta starts stripping pennies off this on almost a daily basis. Yeah, and you mentioned the Comey Barrett timeline too, which was expedited under unusual circumstances. Even that, though, is 35, I think, days, with the typical being more like 2+ months. And of course, it's possible that post Comey Barrett, Schumer would say, well, no, I want to expedite this, and that's possible. But of course, remember the deadline here of 12/31 is only a PredictIt deadline, so there's no real magic to that in the Senate calendar, right? Of course, each day they're getting closer and closer to the midterms, and so there's still calendar considerations. But if a surprise vacancy were to happen in, say, early November, Schumer wouldn't be in a rush to get it done by the end of the calendar year, just so that the PredictIt yeses could collect. So again, with wanting to spend a little bit more time researching this, I would tend to think that the no side is the smarter money here. And Pratik, I think you put your finger on it in terms of why this might be a little mispriced, and it's because of the Breyer speculation about a potential retirement. But that seems more likely than not to be the wrong read, the sort of the red herring that might be keeping this yes price somewhat artificially inflated. The one additional counterpoint, and it's sort of the obvious one, is just simply his age. Now, he's the only liberal member or Democrat appointed member that would be a realistic prospect to retire or be forced to retire for health reasons, or possibly to vacate because of his death at almost 83 years old. The other two being Sotomayor and Kagan are only in their 60s. But as a nearly 83-year-old man, there is always the possibility, even if he's in excellent health now and shows no signs of slowing down and has no inclination to retire, 7 months is a long time in the life of an 83-year-old. So there's a prospect there, but that seems to be the only realistic prospect. So it seems like if you're trying to arrive at the fair price here, it's sort of what are the odds that Breyer is incapacitated or meets his demise unexpectedly and relatively soon in the year. So yeah, you've got 7.3 months left in the year, but this happens in the last 2 months of the year. That might not be enough time anyway. So is he going to hang on for at least another 5 months? Probably. Is that probably more probable than 65%? Probably so also. So, Gaeten, you mentioned that you're happy to start unwinding your position sort of in the high 60s. Sort of talking to myself into this as we do more of this real-time chatting about it. But I think you could probably be comfortable holding the short side here somewhere into the 70s. But again, this is the kind of thing that you can't just take that position and walk away from it and not pay too much attention, because it is the kind that can move against you quickly, in all likelihood, before you'd even be able to log in and start unwinding your position. So it's not without risk, but it does seem to be somewhat materially overvalued here on the yes side.
Well,
and I think
I do have
a rough consensus on that. Yeah.
I put my sells back out there. So if anybody wants Gaeten shares, 975 of them available at 67 cents right now. Somebody just bought 25, but at that price, I make 140
got a bit of a fill there.
Yeah, but I make 140 bucks on this, so it's just not bad for 2 hours work. Yes, I could hold it, but I don't think I will. Just don't want to monitor it.
Yeah, no, it's not bad. And again, it's a good strategy if you're watching these new markets as they're coming out and you're able to do your homework. If you're able to join us here live at 1 p.m. and listen to those like Pratik and Gaeten who've done their homework on these and can share their insights with you, you can get in and scalp a handful of pennies before the market becomes a little bit more efficient and sort of a lower risk way to carve out some profits here as the markets are finding their footing. But gentlemen, I think with that, we're just about out of time. I see it's about 1:40. So I'm going to thank the panelists, Pratik, Chougule from Star Spangled Gamblers, and of course, Gaeten, fresh back from Cancun with his, what would we call it, vanilla yogurt tan and a pocket full of recent PredictIt winnings. Thank you again to our producer, Zach. Thank you to the good folks at PredictIt for helping make this show happen. Don't forget to go claim your free $25 at PredictIt by going to predictit.org/promo/oldbull25. Please follow us on Twitter and connect with us there. We are at Old Bull TV. Thanks again for watching. Happy trading, and we will see you next time.